Okay, so we've been doing puppets in my room. It started because of feeling nice. I know, can we just start? This feels so fake.
You want to start over?
No,
Yeah. Let's just let it run. Can you flip it?
I know.
She can flip it. Yeah.
Can you roll it?
Yeah, but I've got.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just not iPad savvy. Okay. We saw the Christmas puppet show that the people came to put on, and our kids really liked the puppets. But it was right before break, so we weren't sure if they would remember the puppets after break. So the first week back, we put up a puppet stage and kind of displayed the puppets in a new way, and just to see if the children showed interest in them still. And they still did. They really explored the stage and the different puppets, and they started to have conversations with the puppets. So those are pictures of our...
Did they know to put the puppets on their hands and act out, or did you show them? Or?
No, they knew.
They knew,
Yeah, they knew to put them on their hands. And some of the kids, like Isabella, she really knew how to have talk. You could talk back and forth with her. And some of the other kids just put them on their hands and would get behind. They didn't really understand the concept of the stage.
Mm-hmm.
To hide, you're supposed to hide. There was this blue tarp on there, and they were just this is in the way, what is the point of this? So we took that down, and they never, ducked down, just showed the puppets, but they liked to be behind the stage, and one would be on one side and one on the other a lot, and they'd have, pretend back and forth, yeah. And there's only, a couple that would really respond to you.
Did they have conversation with you, or did they do where they talk, or did they try to put their hands in mouth? What was the way in which children first talked or projected their voice with them?
Isabella would do, put the puppet on and say, voila, talking for the puppet, and talk back and forth with, if you're my name's Bob, she'd go, I'm Minnie Mouse, and she, talked for the puppet. The other children just kind of talked in general and used the puppet. Yeah, they didn't really understand, the mouth moving or anything like that. It's just more generic play with a soft object. So.
And you had people and animals both that you used?
Yes.
And did you notice different voice or actions with animals or people?
No. It was very much the same. Especially Isabel, it's the same voice for all objects. Deep and manly. No. Yeah, they're all the same. They haven't, and they still haven't really differentiated their voice at all. The puppets still use the same voice. So, and then the next week, we started talking about stick puppets, just to because we used the hand puppets, and so we used these at our circle time, and I talked about how they were stick puppets because they have a stick on them, and we introduced 2 new songs so the kids get to use the puppets when we sing the songs, and they really like the songs. They asked to sing them all the time, and then later on in the week, once they kind of understood what a stick puppet was, we asked them if they wanted to make stick puppets. And we had put the sticks out in our area, but no one had really noticed. Because we thought, well, maybe they'll go over there and notice the sticks, but no one really explored art that week. They go in phases, I think, with the art. And so we asked them if they wanted to, and they made puppets. So this one's Dora, and this is an airplane, and this is just a puppet. I don't know if this one is. But they made their puppets, and afterwards, there's pictures. They went over to the puppet stage, and they played with their puppets. They didn't really have much dialogue with the stick puppets, no, but they did.
But you saw action with them?
Yeah.
So when you said one was Dora, did the child use it in any way to reenact
Yeah,
Dora?
with Dora they did, because there were 2 Doras, I think. So those 2, I believe, were kind of talking to each other, but the other ones were just kind of standing there, moving them and exploring them.
Did they take them over to the puppet stage?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they did.
And I think, Jesse, it's important that as we see the representational level of children, that you valued that in your classroom, and that there wasn't a teacher direction to try to make it into something, but you allowed their own representational level, and then you also then let them use their level of expression with those.
Mm-hmm. And we try to encourage like scissor using too, like we help them, but some of them tearing and scissors to get the object. I obviously cut this one out. But yeah. And Tyra and I made other ones too, so they could see both, like what they were making, and also kind of put.
Did you see a connection to what they made and back to these puppets? Was there any dialogue or discussion of that?
No, because there was like an airplane and Superman and Dora. Like one said Dora, the other, a couple other. Oh, mine's Dora too. So no, they didn't really. None of them really made animals.
But you had introduced the stick part of it, so they were.
Yeah, so they understood like how to use them, and that was the goal. We just wanted to introduce like the type, and then they could kind of go and make whatever they wanted. But that way we were just like, make a stick puppet, and they're like, well, what's a stick puppet? So we just wanted to have these in use in our classroom to give them knowledge of how to use it. And then the stick puppets, we kind of branched off of that and wondered how we could explore shadows with the puppets. And there wasn't any, like the children didn't do anything in our classroom that made us be like, oh, they're interested in shadows, but we just thought that it would be an interesting thing to use the stick puppets with light. And so we went to the NPR and we projected with the projector a big light square on the wall. So the children, they explored their shadows, and then we also, I didn't bring those, but we also had large stick stencils, cutouts that we used on sticks to make stick puppets that were just solid images of like a bear and different animals. There were some people and a house, an airplane. So we put those out and projected the light and just kind of let the children come in and explore. And at first they really focused on their shadows on the wall. And they were like touching the shadows, and then they noticed the puppets and the light, and so they're like, oh, la luz, and they were really focused on the light. And then when they first used the puppets, they like put them flat against the wall, and then as like the time went on, they figured out, oh, if you hold it back, you can see the shadow, and we like watched our bodies move and the puppets move.
How much language in that? Was it more movement than language with the shadows?
There was a lot of labeling, because they labeled whatever object they picked up, they labeled that a lot. Or they'd say, oh, that's me, like their names or of their friends or themselves in the objects. And then too, we later on we put some of the images or the stick puppets on the projector, so it made them really big on the wall. And so they'd be like, oh, the Nina is on. They labeled a lot of whatever we put up there, or put this on there. They'd ask, for certain puppets to go up on the projector. And it's funny because, like Brian, especially with the computer and with the puppets, he always thinks they're real. So he's always like, hola, and he's like, Jesse, like, why aren't they talking to me? He does that with anything like animated. It's really cool. So he was like waving at the puppets and gave the puppet a high five, and one of the girls like started singing the fish song when she saw the whale puppet. So a lot of like association going on with the images, and then like Isabella was able to understand that it's a puppet, and she started having a conversation. She did her hola, and then I couldn't understand because it's Spanish. But she started talking like for the puppet as she was doing the shadow on the wall. So she's a little more advanced than some of the others in what they perceive the puppet to be on the wall.
Which is a good contrast when you say Brian is in the immediate and he sees that puppet as live and real.
Yeah.
And Isabella can project her own self to that puppet and have dialogue back and forth, so that shows a good gap between their development and that.
Yeah, she always blows everyone. And then Fabio, he was like, he noticed the shadow and he thought it was an avian, where Allison used the same puppet and she thought it was a fish. So just the interpretation of the different silhouettes of the puppets.
And you chose familiar two-dimensional figures. You chose people and fish and cars,
Yeah.
so they were simple for them, so that the flat two-dimensional object had shape and meaning to them.
And there were a couple that were, like there was a giraffe and there were a couple that they weren't like as familiar with, so I think that was good too, to introduce new, new images that we don't always talk about giraffes when we talk about dogs and cats, a lot, so.
So
Yeah,
to
but-
introduce new vocabulary to them.
Yeah, but it was mostly things that they could like see up there and know exactly what it was. And there's a tree, and they interpret it as like a cloud or flower, and I thought that was interesting. Yeah, because
It's
to me, I'm like, oh, it's a tree. But yeah, they used it as different things, and I thought that was neat to watch them explore what it could be.
So where'd you go next?
So next, we thought what would happen if we project the light in a different way so that the kids would be behind a sheet, so we could just see the shadow and not the child. And so Peggy brought us this wonderful contraption that worked, that we hung a sheet from, and then we put the light behind it. So the kids, on one side, they could just see the shadows. On the other side, they could see their own shadow, kind of like on the wall. So when we first started, they just kind of explored, and they noticed the light again, and they remembered, to hold the puppet away. So they'd already had that experience, and like Mia, she noticed herself. She was like, "Oh, that's me!" Like they started to recognize their shadow, and we took turns, like letting one child go back there to kind of give like a little show, and the kids, so they could be like, "Oh, who's back there? Like, who do you see?" Just to see if they'd recognize like their silhouette, and they would be like, "Oh, it's Isabella." And she like sang and like did a little thing, and everyone got a turn like back there, and then they popped their head around and like, "Did you see me?" Because like I think they know they could see their friends, but they couldn't like, "Can you really still see me when I'm back there?" So it was kind of a object permanence thing, like on an older level.
Right.
And so, or they'd be standing back there like, "I see you," and okay, even though you could not see through the sheet. So.
And then how did you connect puppets with the children? Because first their exploration was their own body and shadows, and then how did you connect puppets with that? Like I see in this picture where you've given them the bears.
Oh, yeah. Well, we brought the puppets in again, the set of stencil puppets, and so that way they could explore them again.
And was there play and their imitation with the puppets with themselves in the shadow, or were they more focused on their own bodies and their?
They were more focused on the puppets.
Okay.
Because they like to gather several of them and then like put them up there, or a couple of them were putting the people like with the horse to like make them ride the horse kind of, and
Was there naming, labeling, or did they give storylines to it? What did you see as far as
No,
language?
there was labeling, no storylines. There was more singing this time.
That's interesting.
And it wasn't as eventful as the first experience. Like they explored it and they liked it, but there was it wasn't like it's like, oh, look at all the like interest. I don't know if that makes sense. Like,
And why do you think? What do you think the difference between behind the screen shadows and projected on the wall shadows?
so maybe just the separation between the kids, like not.
What do you all think? Do you think there's a reason that, especially at this developmental level of seeing self and projecting self?
They could like really understand the simple, like where this light is coming from here, and then we see the light, I think more so than they probably could. I think, like you said, like the object permanence, like, can they really see me? Like,
Yeah, and do they really
quite
realize
grasp it
someone
yet.
else is watching?
It's a good observation because it's immediate here and they're cause and effect, they can
Yeah.
anticipate that and be a part of it, where like you're saying, intense or area, but this side, they know you're over there, but there's projection of what they really look like on the other side.
Yeah.
The advantage to this is what you can see with Mia looking here, she can see herself, so that's what you all are seeing.
Mhm.
So it's not as abstract to her because she has that connection right here. But like you're saying, perhaps knowing people are on the other side, you said they looked around.
Yeah,
Was
they're like-
making the connection of what's really happening in that process.
And that's why I like that we sat down and kind of let them have turns, because I wanted them to grasp that concept of like, oh look, you see your friend went back there and now you're seeing them, because it is abstract, like for them to comprehend like both sides you can see a shadow, right? Not just they're not the only ones who can see it.
Yeah.
So in a period of time, you've gone from very simple, just the average preschool, hand puppets of animals and people, and integrated all the way through to a shadow level of that. And what do you see happening next? Where you think you're going?
When we talked about taking the stick puppets outside to see if they could notice the shadows from the sun, which is another source of light, and just to bring the play outdoors, and then making, the hand puppet with the books to bring like literacy into it, to start telling more stories with puppets, because they love to read books at story time, so figuring out ones that we can incorporate, that we have puppets that correspond to the books. That's kind of our next thoughts. And we talked about doing sock puppets eventually, like just keep expanding on introducing different types of puppets, but
And your goal in this is that children are using language throughout that whole process, and you're expanding children's language from naming to storylines to expression of self. What thoughts do you have as you all look at what she's done and where she suggestions of where you to take it next?
I kind of wonder if you did the projector in your classroom and just like set it up, like in an environment they're familiar with, like around the puppet, even like around your puppet stage or anything, like what would happen then? Would there be more storyline? Because you are revisiting it and they're like somewhat familiar with it, and a more familiar environment.
Yeah,
They have other things available too.
We talked about doing that when we originally did it, and we weren't sure, like, for at least the first experience, there was enough room.
Yeah.
We were like, is this, like, with the tables, like, how are we gonna create room for them all to, like, explore it when it's, like, a fun new thing, and they're all like, wow. So maybe, now that they've had, like, several exposures, it wouldn't be as chaotic to have it in a smaller space, and so I think that would be good.
I think we didn't add that you even changed your environment because puppets people becoming such a predominant curriculum piece.
Yeah, we were getting all these puppets that we're making and using, and they were like shoved in the corner, and I'm like, if this is our project, it needs to be displayed in a way that draws interest to it and not forgot about when we're not working or, using them for circle or something. And we just changed it like Friday, I think. And this week they've already used the stage so much more, like in their free play. And so we've noticed a difference in that too, which is good. Because you want to make sure it's not just what we're doing, but like something that they're exploring on their own in their free time. Otherwise it's not really an interest.
So you have two things happening, the shadows and the light, and connecting that to puppets. So not that they're separate, you want to bring them back together, but as you talked about then exploring outside of puppets, and then not to forget then back to the hand puppets.
Hand puppets that we made for circle time. We've been doing attendance with them.
And do those live in your room or do they just stay at circle?
No, they're out with the puppets. They've survived fairly well. So they like to play with like their friends.
One of the discussions we had that is critical to keep in mind in the environment is that puppets need to be alive and have life to them. And so often in the environment, they get shoved in a drawer, shoved in a box, and so we work hard to get you put in the foam, you use foam to put these in our shoebox when they're
Yeah.
up and alive.
Yeah.
And children engage and interact to the puppet with life instead of just, oh, just put them away and they're in the basket or a box and shove them in.
Yeah.
And your environment reflects that very well. And you classified in group puppets, so they.
Yeah, we kind of store the puppets, the animals, the people, and then the stick puppets they made have their own little box that they easily stand up in. The sack puppets are all together. Those can't, we don't have a way to stand those.
But you've been consciously aware of that those have life, and that for children to engage in them to have life, they need to be a part of the classroom, visible for children in that way. So really nice job there. Let's go back. Mary, do you have thoughts on where to go?
I was just wondering about, and kind of you were talking about this with the storyline, but but like some kind of tie into some book that they really love and some puppets that they could kind of act out and encourage language out like.
Yeah, I think that would be good, because I think we're gonna try Brown Bear, and that's a story like they were already really familiar with and like, so I think that, and we have a lot of puppets too that go with the animals, so
Yeah.
maybe they could, since they know the words, maybe they could start acting out and.
Or even like writing some kind of, since you guys are always into the book writing, writing some kind of book
That's
about the
right.
puppets that you have or something, like giving language to like that.
Yeah.
Some kind of tie
Write a
there.
book on one.
Yeah. Write a book about those hand puppets.
Please.
Or Dora.
What would happen, especially Dora, I think
Mhm.
that's a connection. that
Yeah,
we see
our
that's a
kids
continued
love
Tie
thread.
that in, yeah.
And then to think of a book and then to have the options of puppets and say, what do you think we should use for this? Because at this point, like the ducks and the frogs, you've shown them and introduced them to the puppet. They did representation of making their own, and you had a bit of information of how they would act with that. But to choose a story and then say, what puppet should we use for this? What do we need to make this puppet story come alive? And see what their response will be to that.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting to see. And we've kind of with the duck one, like in the song it says like mother duck said, and whoever's mom, the mother duck says quack quack. So like we've kind of started like giving them like whoever gets to be that duck gets to say that part of the
That's like a
song.
role.
Yeah, and so I think that's kind of like will help bridge into like you said the story and like having them help tell the story because they're catching on to like, oh, I'm supposed to say this.
Yeah.
Because at first they just looked at me like, what? I was like, quack, quack. And they're like, ah. So now they know like their role. So I think that would be a good bridge into.
And did you say Isabel changes tonation?
Yes.
Or, so just use the deep voice for that?
Yes. For all puppets.
Quack, quack. So as you look at each of the children and their developmental goals, you're looking at language and literacy and storyline. Are there other things that you think will come out of this based upon development? Shift you back to just thinking about where you take it from a developmental perspective, because projecting allows so much to emerge and happen. What do you all hope Jessie out in that?
Just the social skills, even for.
Like a conversation, like waiting and taking turns and.
And one of our girls doesn't have that conversation skill at all. She just talk. I mean, she'll say whatever you want her to, but she doesn't understand like a give and take of a conversation. So I think having other kids and us model like that give and take would be really helpful for just her development to see.
But she's just at the labeling name.
Yeah, you say hi, she goes hi, or you know her name. Like you say hi Allison, she goes hi Allison. No, you say hi Jessie. So just like showing her like helping her understand that give and take and having lots of it going on around her would be good for her development.
Or like creatively, I'm Isabella, but when I put this thing on my hand, I'm Dora.
Mickey Mouse.
Yes.
So we'll come back and see in a couple of weeks where it's gone, to look to see where shadows go, puppets go, the combination of them.
I have like an idea since it all started with the puppets coming alive, like if you projected like a video of a puppet show and show them again like how they were alive, since that's how it started, I just wonder if that re-sparked.
Yeah, I think that would be good because, yeah, just to